Okay, really good question from Zachary Godak. I hope I'm answering this right. He said, do your top 10 FCS games in week 0 and week 1. I took that to mean you meant top 10 in both week 0 and week 1. Since there aren't a ton of FCS games in week 0, I think you meant week 0 and week 1, 10 games from both those weeks. So that's what I'm going to do. 10 games, my top 10 games of week 0 and week 1. Number 1, these aren't like, ranking them from 1 to 10. I'm just numbering them from 1 to 10. At number 1, I have McNeese versus Tarleton State. Clifton McDowell in a new uniform following a natty run in 2023. I think it's an understatement to say a lot of people are interested to see how this game is going to go. I'm hoping he plays really well. I know that McNeese State team was not very good last year. I'm hoping Clifton can turn that around. I know he has a great deal of confidence. I love his mentality about the game. I think, I just want to see. I think Tarleton will be a pretty good team as well. They play in the United Athletic Conference. I'm excited to see how they're doing. I know they moved up not too long ago. Within the last 5 to 10 years, Tarleton moved up to the FCS. So they've been decently moving up year over year over year, trying to make those playoffs, trying to get into the playoffs, trying to make a run. How do they play? National television. You went to the national championship last year, Clifton. How are you going to play this year? I'm very interested. I want to see that. At number 2, I have Montana State versus New Mexico. Montana State is currently favored by 8 on ESPN Bet, which is absolutely crazy. I think the first time I saw it, they were favored by like 4.5. For them to be favored by a whole touchdown is crazy against an FBS opponent in New Mexico. How do they play? How do they look this year? New Mexico obviously plays in the Mountain West Conference. A lot of people think if there were eventually to be an FCS-FBS merger or FCS Group of 5 merger, Montana State could maybe be one of the teams that ends up in the Mountain West. So this could eventually be maybe an opponent that Montana State would have to play. Now, Coulter, we were talking on the Big Sky Breakdown this past week, talking about what that would look like if there was an FCS G5 merger. Probably a Mountain West North, Mountain West South, or something like that. Shout out to Andrew Schmidt. The Snow Belt might become a thing if that were to happen. But right now, it's FCS versus the G5, Montana State versus New Mexico. I think Montana State, this is going to be a big test for them. How good will they be this year? This will be a test of that. An FBS opponent. They came close to beating Wyoming a couple of years ago. They came up short. How will this play out? How will this play out? Another good game that I'm interested in seeing. Number 3, if you follow this channel, I talk about this game almost every couple of weeks, and there was just some more interesting developments online of Dion making noise online. NDSU versus Colorado. I think NDSU is going to be a very, very good team. They've been a good team at the FCS level year in and year out. Even last year when they had a down year, they went to the semifinals and narrowly missed making it to the national champion. We are talking about the class of the FCS versus Dion and his Colorado Buffs. This game is must-see TV. If you are telling me you are not going to be tuned into this game, you are ludicrous. This is going to be one of the most exciting games early on in the season. I'm praying it's not a blowout. Some people think it might be a blowout. Some people think NDSU can win. I'm interested to find out. Dion recently made news this week. He's always in the news because he's Deion Sanders. He's the best cornerback we've ever seen in the game in the history of football. Who wouldn't want to see this guy? He just made news because of a CBS reporter put him as one of the second worst coach in the Big 12 conference. He didn't like that, so he wasn't answering questions from the CBS reporter. A lot of people had some words. A lot of people didn't think very highly of that. Some people were on his side. Obviously, a lot of Colorado fans were on his side. Like, if you're going to talk down on our team, don't expect us to answer questions from you. Sean Rainey of SWX said that, he didn't think very highly of Dion doing that, and in turn said NDSU by 20. So we will see. I'm very excited to see this game. I think, at the very least, I think the line was 8.5 last time I looked at it. I think NDSU could cover that. I think they could stay within 8.5 points of Colorado. I think Colorado is going to be a decent squad this year. How good will they be? Could this be a test? Who knows? Dion coached at Jackson State before, so he knows the FCS level. He understands NDSU. I mentioned a couple weeks ago how Dion mentioned, why would they do this to us? They know how good Dion fully understands how good NDSU is. He was hoping for a layup. He mentioned that he's not very happy with his athletic director for scheduling this team because he knows NDSU is a formidable opponent. No matter how you slice it up, NDSU always plays FBS opponents tough. always. They are a good team. They play hard. They are coached very well, and it's going to be a good game. This game is must-see TV. That is why they're on this list. Next, SDSU versus Oklahoma State. SDSU, or South Dakota State, is the back-to-back national champion who hasn't lost since 2022. They lost that 7-3 game against Iowa. Really, really close game. Honestly, they could have won that game. Would have been awesome if they would have beat Iowa. How good are they this season? They lost a ton of talent last year. How good will they be this year? Another good game that I'm excited to see. At number, what was that? 1, 2, 3, 4. At number 5, Montana versus Missouri State. Missouri State has a few players who used to play on Montana, Dylan Simmons, and they also have Iverson Young. I don't know how much playing time those guys will get, but if you're asking me what are my top 10 games, I'm interested in seeing that game because I know they have a few former Montana players on that team. Obviously, I cover the Big Sky, so that's something I'm interested in seeing. Montana versus Missouri State. Next, Sac State versus San Jose State. Sac State beat Stanford last year. They beat them 30-23 early on in the season. Can they do it again this season? Sac State, I think also, if they do beat, it's weird to say because Sac State beat Stanford and then they're a middle of the pack Big Sky team. So it's like, are these FBS games always a gauge of how good an FCS team is going to be? That might be a good question for me to ask. How good of a gauge is a team? Because Montana beat Washington in 2021, and they came very close to winning the Big Sky, but a lot of people would assume if you beat Washington, a Power 4 team who was ranked 20th in the preseason rankings, you would think that they would go run the table in the Big Sky. That did not happen. We lost to Eastern Washington. We lost to Sac State. In turn, we didn't win the Big Sky Conference. And no, we beat Montana State that year. But, Sac State versus San Jose State, I think it could be a decent test for them to see how good they are in 2024. But more than anything, I think it could be a really good game. Two Northern California teams. How does that game play out? Next is Florida A&M versus Norfolk State. Florida A&M is the reigning Celebration Bowl champion, beating Howard last year 30-26. Really close game. Florida A&M had one of the better defenses in the subdivision last year in FCS football. Definitely probably the best defense in HBCU football last year in the MEAC or SWAC conference. How do they play this year? How do they look this year? Interesting game to open up the season. I think that's going to be a great game. Next, we have Youngstown State versus Villanova. Two playoff teams from 2023. Villanova obviously made it to the quarterfinals. Playing SDSU, I'd say probably pretty tight. Probably one of the closest games that SDSU got held to last year, especially in the playoffs. That game was a really windy, really, really cold game. It was really hard to put the ball in the air. The ball was going all over the place. The wind was swirling. But that is a game I'm excited to see. Two playoff teams from last year. Good test for both teams to start 2024. Really good test. I think that game is in week 1, not week 0. VMI versus William and Mary. William and Mary was close to being a playoff team in 2023. They had a really, really good defense. They had two really good pass rushers that were wrecking shop last year. What will they look like this season? What does William and Mary look like in 2024? What does VMI look like in 2024? But most definitely, what does William and Mary look like in the CAA conference? Are they going to be one of the better teams in the CAA? Are they going to be middle of the pack? I think they ended up, because there's so many teams in the CAA, they ended up towards the top of the CAA, but not making the playoffs because there were so many good teams like Villanova, who we just talked about a minute ago. Last on this list is UC Davis versus Cal. Another good Big Sky team who could end up getting a Power 5 win. Cal, man, is Cal in the Big 10 or is Cal in the Big 12? I can't remember right now. Are they? I don't know what conference Cal is in. There's so much conference alignment going on these days. I can't remember what conference Cal is in right now. But UC Davis versus Cal. Cal is one of the lower tier, what used to be called the Pac-12. They weren't one of the better teams in the Pac-12. They were usually towards the bottom of the Pac-12. Idaho looked like they were going to beat them last year, and then Cal went on a run in the second half and ended up winning by like a touchdown or two. Can UC Davis get an FBS victory to start their 2024 campaign? Can they do it? We will see. Those are my top 10 games that I'm looking for in week 0 and week 1. This question was from Zachary Godak. McNeese Tarleton, Montana State versus New Mexico. No, NDSU versus Colorado, Must-see TV, SDSU versus Oklahoma State. I think Oklahoma State, I didn't even talk about Oklahoma State. I think Oklahoma State is going to be very good in 2024, so I don't foresee SDSU beating them. This might be their first loss in 2 seasons since Iowa. We will see. Montana, Missouri State, Sac State versus San Jose State, Florida A&M versus Norfolk State, Youngstown State versus Villanova, VMI versus William and Mary, and then UC Davis versus Cal. You guys let me know what you think about in the comments. Did I miss any games in week 0 and week 1? I think I covered probably the biggest games that people want to see. I think those are the games that people are going to want to see. What do you guys think? Did I miss one, or are you guys excited to see these as I am? Let me know in the comments, and I will move on.